More weekly whiskey, more problems of the world. And just so you know, the weekly whiskey isn't causing the problems of the world. Actually, the weekly whiskey is helping solve the problems of the world. This is Implicit Bias. I'm your host, Kevon Bordelon. Great crew here in the Mr. Lester's top secret podcast lair. And Caleb, you've got to stop hitting the microphone.
Maybe if the bottle was on the other side.
Well, Tug is not having any, our producer for this particular episode.
Well, maybe he could pour my whiskey for me.
You know what?
He's not doing anything else.
I was about to say he's obviously not. All right.
You and Kevon need to switch seats.
Actually, that might happen. You never know. It might
That's a
actually
thought.
be.
That's
It
a
might
thought.
actually be a thought. Yeah,
But then I wouldn't get to sit right here.
yeah, but we got some stuff coming that's going to go over this one. So
I haven't killed a red stag yet. so-
well, that's on you, not on me. So that is Caleb Morris at the bar. We've got Danny Izzo, who you've heard, Chris Castro. We're having a great discussion on shadow government, creating it. Just is it opposition? Danny, you wanted to chime in. We'll wrap up this conversation before we move on.
I did.
And you forgot.
No. Actually, no. My problem with the whole shadow government thing is in 2026, in the middle of this presidential term, we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country.
Correct?
For 2 years prior to that, we fought a war to get us out of
British rule.
British rule, which is where this comes from. We fought a war to not do this stuff.
It's a great point. It is a great point. And look,
We've set up a different form of government from what Britain has
for a reason.
for a really good reason. And we're not a democracy. We are a representative republic. And to me, a shadow government has no part in a representative republic because we've elected representatives to oversee things, and the executive branch runs things. And I don't believe that we need to have people that are part of the representative branch
Trying to run
actually
things.
trying to interfere with aspects of the executive branch. Overseeing them, the checks and balances, absolutely. That's exactly what we need. And we've lost a lot of that. But this isn't the way to get back to it.
Caleb, you want to chime in real quick, and then we're going to wrap this up. And
Yeah, I'm just really happy we're not wearing wigs.
I don't
I
know.
would wear a wig anytime.
And look, and I also get, I think, Chris, to Chris's point, which is the opposition to what you don't want is just simply human nature. And I think that's part of where he's going with it. So this is something we're going to have to deal with as a country moving forward over the next 4 years. It just is. And as a matter of fact, it leads right into what is, to me, a really big discussion point coming out of the 2024 election. This is the Mr. Lester's Top Secret Podcast lair, thanking God on this Thanksgiving Eve, something like that, edition of Implicit Bias, that we are coming to you from somewhere in downtown Lafayette, Louisiana, not coming to you from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Because that is what ultimately worries me about the way opposition gets run. So for those who don't know, Bucks County, for some reason, is the political Roswell with regards to voting irregularity and to, as far as election boards go, stuff just going wrong, right? So they are the voting equivalent to UFOs of Roswell. It all happens there. It's there. It's an epicenter for some reason. Weeks before the election, they are challenging what they can and cannot count. The days before the election, they are trying to shut down voting, and they have to get restraining orders to get them to leave it open so people can vote, because they happen to have an unprecedented turnout on a side of the aisle that they might, I guess, not have liked. I mean, I don't know. But for some reason, they were trying to tell people to go home. Please don't believe me. The videos are all over the internet. And now you have a Supreme Court ruling in the state of Pennsylvania that tells them, by the way, states run their presidential elections. States run all their elections. They had a Supreme Court ruling in Pennsylvania that told them which votes they could count and which votes they couldn't. And you had the chair of the election board in Bucks County say, and again, please don't believe me. And I'm not going to give you an exact quote because I don't have it up in front of me. I'm not going to put it on a teleprompter. I'm going to give you the general idea, which is people break laws all the time. If I break the law by telling the Supreme Court we are going to count the votes that they tell us are illegal votes that we are not to count, I want them to pay attention to us. We are going to count them. And guess what? The votes they are counting, this is my shocked face. The votes they are counting are somehow creating a question mark around a very strong red party victory that they just keep finding votes and finding votes and finding votes and finding votes until what was a blowout is now close or maybe even a loss for the party that uses red as its color.
Well, and look, you say that we don't know what drives it and everything else. But we look at what they're doing.
I'm lying.
Like you know what drives it. When you look at, there's one thing to have opposition. There's one thing to disagree. This is blatant disregard for legal precedents and law.
She actually said precedent doesn't matter in
Yes.
this country anymore.
And at that point in time, you're like, okay, repercussions. If you are going to break the law, the state, and that's a state problem, the state should pursue action against these individuals and let the law figure it out.
Let's go to the bar.
Okay. I don't know if you saw the latest. They had a huge
They did. A huge hearing. Yes.
turnout at their last meeting, which I believe was Tuesday night.
It was right a couple days before we record this episode. Scott Pressler is pretty well known on X and a big Republican activist in Bucks County. He was there. He spoke. It was a big deal.
And a lot of people spoke, and a number of people who are residents of that county got up and said, I am filing a lawsuit against you.
Oh.
And you, and pointed to several people and said, because this isn't going to go anymore.
It went farther than that. One resident actually said, I am filing a criminal complaint and named section and code against the election board in Bucks County. So, Chris, I'm curious as to your take on the legality and the legalese. Do we have precedent of a Supreme Court ruling in a state going all the way up, so a case being filed, it going to the Supreme Court in the state, and then essentially the body which lost basically saying, and I'm going to do it on camera, the body that lost basically going, we're not going to do it, and doing it anyway?
I can't speak to any precedent on the issue. I mean, I don't know, and I haven't researched that question, but I think that what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did was enforce the rule that was set for Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken, is a majority Democrat body, and they upheld the rule because that's what the legislature set forth, and it all came down to whether or not an envelope was dated. Look, if you fill in the blanks, you fill in the blanks. If you miss a blank and the law says that you had to fill in the blank, and you lose. I'll tell you this. I've had some cases, in my practice that came down directly to a question of whether or not a blank was filled in, and the Louisiana Supreme Court came down in a civil matter and ruled in my favor because the blank wasn't filled in. Was it what the other side wanted? Obviously not. But the point is that they enforced what the legislative entity said was the requirement that needed to be done. And in this instance, it's ridiculous. You can attempt. It's fine. Go ahead. Bring your case to court. Let a judge rule on it. The judge rules in your favor, great. If the judge doesn't rule in your favor, stand up, walk away, and take it. And that's what happened here in this instance, and that's what should have happened exactly. So, whatever party was opposing this issue, too bad. You lost. You didn't have the simple fill-in-the-blank question, and that's the way it should end.
Well, and I appreciate that. And here's the other part, because my understanding is it came down to dates and signatures as well, right? So if a signature could or couldn't be verified, and this is it's very funny to me. I guess I'm channeling my inner Alanis Morissette. Isn't it ironic that the same people who said there was no fraud in 2020 were on the losing side of this argument in 2024 and did the same exact thing in 2020? Because in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court came down and said the legislature has to make the laws. And if the legislature doesn't make the laws, judges can't create their own laws as to what elections should look like. And you had judges all over the state of Pennsylvania changing dates that ballots could be submitted, changing criteria, the whole 9 yards. The Supreme Court got it, said it right this time, and they're still trying to break the law. That's our implicit bias. We got a wrap. We'll come back, Caleb, and we're going to be what? Is it the penultimate segment already? Tug. This is going by too fast. It's too much fun. I am having too much fun. Stick around so you can have too much fun on Implicit Bias.